Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar comic review. This one's going to be for the Team Avatar Treasury Library Edition, which was just released yesterday and today, depending on where you bought it from. Basically, comic book store release date is today, Wednesday. Yesterday was for pretty much everywhere else. So, what is this book? Obviously, it's a library edition. That means it's a collected edition for Avatar comics. It's a hardcover, and then of course Team Avatar Treasury means that it collects Katara and the Pirate Silver one-shot, Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy one-shot, and the other one-shot, Suki Alone. The first three of the Avatar one-shot or standalone comics, whatever way you want to call them. So at long last, these books have been collected into a library edition. So it's been a pretty long time coming in the sense that, like, say, the Katara comic came out like 4 years ago at this point. We have had another, like, collected edition, non-hardcover, which I'll go into in just a second. But here is the look at the back cover, which is an image from Katara and the Pirate Silver. The tagline for this is just, what do pirates, prisons, and the lava bender have in common? And the idea is that it's this collection, it's this book, with the theming being that, yes, this is the female members of Team Avatar Treasury. So anyone who ever needs to defend the idea that Suki is a member of Team Avatar, well, you have a very recent book here to prove that she is a Team Avatar member, and being part of this set of books very much highlights that. So very, very cool there. So let's quickly address just editions for these comics here, just so you have some context. So when these books first came out, they of course came out as individual comics. Here they all are with their individual covers, and basically the idea is that this is what our comic trilogies, which ended with Imbalance for Avatar, have sort of evolved into. The creative team from Imbalance, Faith Erin Hicks and Peter Wortman, moved on to do this trilogy of one-shot comics, and now we're of course into the second trilogy of one-shot comics with Azula in the Spirit Temple, The Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, and of course the recently announced Ashes of the Academy. So this is what our mainline Avatar comics have sort of changed into since Imbalance. From up top, basically because of Mike O'Brien and Avatar Studios, they made the decision to move away from trilogies and switch to a sandbox style of comic, which is where we get these one-shot standalone stories from. So yeah, they came out like this. So it effectively is a trilogy, just it's not part 1, part 2, and part 3. The only interesting thing here is that the previous collected edition for these comics that came out after the individual releases was this box set of the comics. Also, as you can see here, called Team Avatar Treasury. It uses the same cover. This was the debut for that cover. It's just the 3 of these books in a box set. But also there is a poster that is part of this set as well. So the poster is this, of course, when you open it out. It is just the cover for Team Avatar Treasury. A nice little bonus thing, if you don't care about having the big fancy hardcover or any of the extras that are in the library edition, which I'll get into in a second, this is a nice enough collected edition. I think the only problem with this is the communication around it, in that usually we would have expected a trio of comics to be collected into a library edition soonish after the release, like within a year. Obviously it's happening well afterwards now, but they announced this and they never said what their plans were for library edition. So a lot of people did buy this assuming that this was going to be the only collected edition, and I think a lot of people feel kind of burned about that now that the library edition has been announced. At least going forward, we know now that this is the situation. So when the next trio of one-shots gets collected, if they do announce a box set like this, just know that you probably don't need to buy it, because there will be a library edition a little bit later down the line. And again, this is the big choice buying decision here, is that the individual parts are smallish comics. The library edition is of course a pretty big comic here. You can see the size difference here. And that's even factoring in the fact that this is the box set of the comics as well, making it a little bit bigger. It's still quite a lot bigger. So that's those editions there. So yeah, buying decision here is effectively, do you buy the box set of the standard comics, or do you buy the collected edition hardcover based on pretty much Do you just want the comics in a nice set, or do you want big hardcover books for a full-on collection? Because this, of course, fits in perfectly with a lot of the previous Avatar hardcovers. So I have the Imbalance one here. I have the other ones, but I didn't want to carry over a big stack of other comics. But just know that Imbalance is, of course, the last of the set of 6 mainline trilogies. And, of course, this book is actually very similar to that, because if you note this, same form factor here. Completely, they're just as thick as each other. Basically, page count is exactly the same height, same width, all that sort of stuff. And of course, one of the big things is that the spine image, the spine design is exactly the same. You've got the sort of like darker colors here with the white text, and of course one character on the kind of spines representing that comic. So the consistency there is very, very nice. So it all depends on what way you want to display them, because it's an interesting one, because of course of the 3 one-shots included here, the Katara one is set during the series, the Toph one is set in the middle of a lot of the comic trilogies, and then the Suki one is also set during the series. So where you position this in your collection is kind of odd. Like, do you put it after Imbalance and do it in release order, or put it somewhere else? That's an interesting choice. I'm probably just going to display it like this, with it appearing after Imbalance, to just highlight the release order kind of trend for the comics, and the fact that the one-shots typically do have content that relates to the comic timeline stuff. So this size also means that this library edition has annotations in it, so the creator commentary as we go through the page. So when we take a look inside the book, you will see that, but there are also concept art extras, which we'll get into in a second. Final comparison here with the other hardcovers is that I do have the short story collection library edition for Avatar here. So this is Lost Adventures and Team Avatar Tales collected together, and you can see that it also has the same spine design, different page count because it's 2 different collections kind of added together. But the big thing with this is that this is very representative of the Korra library editions, where it's not as wide because it doesn't have annotations, but otherwise it fits very nicely in your collection. So you just have to be aware that on your shelf there's going to be that kind of slight offset depending on what way you want to actually like position them, but they still are as consistent as they can realistically be. So that's that. So getting back to this and taking a look inside, we've already looked all the way around. Usual stuff kind of in terms of like the inside cover, where you get a bunch of variety of images kind of edited out of the comics and kind of thrown in as we go through the kind of credits pages into the start of the book. And the way they do the separation between the comics here is that each of the comics starts with the cover from the kind of individual part. So that was the standard cover for Katara and the Pirate Silver, and you get that here. And of course, when we get through 72 pages after this and go into Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy, we also again get the cover kind of shown to us. Let me see, can I quickly get that? Oh yeah, here. Yeah, same there. There's the cover for Toph Beifong's, and it's the same for Suki Alone, obviously. As we go through the book here, we then get to the end of Suki Alone, and this is where we get into our concept art extras. So you can see here, last page of Suki Alone into the concept art. 13 pages of concept art extras we get here. Most of it is different designs for the various covers of the kind of individual parts. So you get a few different concept art designs for Katara and the Pirate Silver, some for Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy, some for Suki Alone, with the only other concept art being the design work for the new character for Katara and the Pirate Silver, Jang, the pirate. So there's 2 pages of concept art extras for her, which is kind of nice to see the detail on her, especially because she has gone on to since then appear in Avatar Generations, which was very cool to get some extra content with her there. But you can see there's the Toph covers, different kind of earlier versions of this before they settled on what they actually eventually ended up with. Oh yeah, and there is also this one image here of the Metal Bending Academy and the landscape around it in Yu Dao, of course. Peter Wortman in the annotation notes, putting in quite a bit of effort to make sure he got that right. And then, of course, Suki alone cover concepts as well. And there's a few of them. And they wrap up the concept art stuff. So they're always nice to see, but very much just a bonus extra. Not something I would ever buy a book specifically for. It's just those concept art stuff, but it's nice to get it there. I will say definitely for me, like a large part of why I buy these is just I do like having the big hardcover books as part of my collection. As a collector of Avatar kind of books and merchandise, that's why I don't mind kind of repeats and buying an extra copy of the comics, just because I feel they're some of the more important content we get for Avatar in the last few years, and I like having the kind of big version. That's the main buying decision here, is the hardcover format over the, in my mind, pretty light extras that you actually get here, which is the concept art and of course the annotations, which I'm pretty much going to wrap up the review with here. So yes, we do get annotations in this book. Now, what are annotations for anyone who's unfamiliar? Like I said, this book is quite wide compared to like the Korra library editions and the short story ones. That's because in the Avatar ones, they've decided to, from the start, make them extra wide, have these borders on the sides of the pages so that there can be creator commentary on specific pages of the book. Now, the problem with these is that they don't appear on all of the pages, or not even half of the pages, and in some cases not even a third of the pages. And so it really feels like it's a weird decision to affect the entirety of the book, where, like over on this side, you can see here, no annotations on this page, but there is some on this page. But then as you'll go through the book, you'll see that sometimes there's just, a lot of the time, there's no annotations anywhere. And of course, to make space for them, there has to be space on the top, bottom, and both sides of every single page of the book. And it just never feels like they do enough. I don't want to go on too much of a rant about the annotations and how I feel they miss the mark, but I do want to give a little bit of detail here in terms of what's happening here. On the positive side of things, this is the book that has annotations that actually has the most annotations out of all of the previous releases. So Team Avatar Treasury, this book, has annotations on 81 out of the possible 216 pages. The 216 number, again, to explain it, is that annotations appear on the pages where there is actually like a page of content from the book, and each of the one-shots as well as parts of an individual comic are always like 72 pages of actual comic content. So 3 times 72 is 216. So that's the max there can ever be. So this has 81 pages that feature at least an annotation on it, but it also means that there is the rest of that where there really isn't anything. So it's well under half, but it actually is the first comic to have over a third of the pages that do have annotations. It's the first one that's over 72. It's the first one that's over 70, and in fact it's the first one that's over 65. So, and the stats on the other books, just in case you're wondering, The Promise has annotations on 58 pages out of 216, The Search 51, The Rift only 36. That was really bad for that book. Only 36 pages with annotations. Smoke and Shadow 60, North and South 65, Imbalance also 65, and then we are up to 81 here. Specifically just because it is 3 separate books. It's 24 pages with annotations for Katara and the Pirate Silver, 31 for Toph, and 26 for Suki alone. So pretty evenly spaced out. With the Toph book, it's mainly a bit higher just because there's a few times where there's just like a very small comment on one page and then a very small comment from like the other like the writer or the artist on the other page, and they're a little bit more spread out in the Toph book, and I think that makes it feel like there's a lot more going on there. The problem with these is though that sounds great, like 81 pages with commentary, but One, you immediately have to cut that down by like a third, because a third of it is just very random comments, very basic comments of literally Faith Erin Hicks and Peter Warbin just pointing out, hey, there's an animal on the page, isn't that cool? Hey, this is a very obvious reference to Avatar. You probably got this when you read the book, but here it is again. This was fun to write, like very basic comments of like, I enjoyed doing this, I enjoyed doing that, and not really kind of what you're here for with the annotations, which is more of a behind the scenes breakdown of like, how did this come about? How did you make this decision? Why did you make this decision? That sort of stuff. There's not really a lot of that in the annotations, and that's always been my criticism of it. Every so often in the annotations in these books, there'll be a tidbit of information where they'll reveal the name of a background character or something like that. Or that, hey, we changed this from this to what you see on the page because of this reason. I think you get that one time in this book. They mention Joan Hilty made a suggestion on one of the panels involving Toph to have her basically shout, I'm bored out loud, instead of what was originally there in the script, which was for her to just sort of say it normally. And it works better for Toph's character and the story they're telling here, for her to just be really exasperated about how bored she is and how much she feels things need to become more exciting in her life. And that was kind of cool to get, but it's one random moment, and for the most part, they don't really delve into it kind of all that much kind of beyond that. There's some of the more mid-range commentary where, you know, saying like Suki alone, Faith Erin Hicks gives a little bit of analysis on the kind of core plot with Suki in the prison and like understanding Suki's character. But because that is fundamentally what the book is about, it doesn't really feel like it's a particularly strong analysis beyond what is just like obviously presented there. It's like, yes, that is the plot of this book that you just effectively laid out. There's no real commentary there. There's no real like, I wish I could have added more in or anything like that. And that's always been my frustration with these, is just that you go through a lot of these and it's, yeah, you cut out so much of it because it's just a one-line, pretty inane comment. A lot of it is just very blunt to the point. A lot of it just doesn't feel like it's particularly relevant. And then the handful that are finally there at the end still maybe feel like, go on, say more. Like, you pointed this detail out. Now, are you going to explain why you added that in? Like, say, what you find this animal interesting. Why did you decide to have it be that specific animal in that scene? Who suggested that? Those are the details that I think are missing a lot of the times with this, because a lot of times it does feel kind of blank. That even when there is commentary, it's never quite what you want it to be. Like, let me point out some of the ones that I found to be a little bit more interesting in this book. So in Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy, at one point, Faith Erin Hicks says, introducing Sun, the cutest little lava bender ever. I wish we'd had a little bit more time to spend with him in this comic, but maybe he'll show up somewhere in the future. That's kind of interesting. The prospect of seeing Sun again is interesting, but where? In what book? How on earth is that going to happen? I can't picture it right now. Do you mean anything by that, or is that just very much, even from her as the writer of the comics, just a hope? Or is it a tease? What's going on there? Similarly, I wish we'd had more time to spend with him in this comic. You were the writer of the comic. You could have done that yourself. Can you talk about why Sun ended up maybe not having as much screen time in this book as you maybe wanted to? That's the kind of problem here, is that like, that is an interesting prompt and you stop it right as it's about to get interesting. One of the other things from just a few pages before that, she says, I like dropping little story hints in the comments about how bending will evolve from Aang's time to Korra's time. We don't see lava bending in the original show, so it was fun to see Toph stumble on a bender doing something she herself wasn't familiar with. And it's like, again, lack of detail. There is lava bending in original Avatar. It's just not in the way we associate it with later on, I suppose, than currently, of like, there is a bit of a difference between an avatar doing lava bending and a earthbender, specialized lava bender doing lava bending, which Sun is, Whereas in Avatar, of course, we did see Kyoshi did lava bending. How else did Kyoshi Island form? We clearly saw lava moving around. We, of course, saw Avatar Zito in the Avatar state little kind of scene before we even knew his name was Avatar Zito. Makes 3 volcanoes erupt. How else did he do that except for lava bending? Roku, when fighting the volcano, clearly does a bit of lava bending, and he's noted in the stuff like, say, like the Avatar RPG to be a lava bender as well. So it's not that we didn't see it. I get the point you're trying to make, but you were not specific enough in what you say there to do that. And it's just little bits and pieces like that, where the annotations to me are an opportunity for the creators to be detailed and actually have all the time in the world. Like the amount of space you have on one of these pages to write detail if you need to, and it just feels like you just didn't want to put the effort in. And I'm aiming that not specifically at Faith Aaron Hicks and Peter Wortman, but at, like, what is the process for this? Do these two just sit down together, look through the books and write up comments? Did they do it separately? Did they have to go to Dark Horse to make this happen? What was the procedure for having these? Where did these annotations specifically come from? Because it does feel like there needs to be a little bit more focus to them of like, hey, can we as fans maybe like ask some questions that you maybe officially answer in these things as like discussion points? Because the last one I'm going to bring up here is I honestly I'm pretty frustrated by this answer. It's the last annotation in the entire book, so it's related to the ending of Suki alone and the whole, you know, Kyoshi appearance. Faith Aaron Hicks. I've had a lot of questions about this scene, so note that she has said she knows this is something fans ask about. Is that actually Kyoshi appearing before Suki? Is it a vision or just a heightened emotional moment? My answer is ... I know what I believe in my heart. What do you believe in yours? That is a terrible answer. And it makes the whole annotations feel pointless. That one of the few obvious, clear-cut, big questions that most people have, you as the writer are refusing to answer for what reason? She doesn't even explain why she's not answering. She wrote that into the book. It was obviously approved by Avatar Studios. So clearly it's okay, but you're not explaining how it happens. And you even go as far as to be like, me as the writer who wrote this scene believes this, but you're not telling us what that is. And you're just being like, it doesn't matter. But the point is that people are asking you this question, so it does matter. I think that's a bad answer. And I think, to a certain degree, either she shouldn't have answered in that way, or at the very least, I think probably Dark Horse probably shouldn't have published that answer because it's so unsatisfying and just left that page blank for annotations if that was going to be the quality of answer. I just think that's kind of a bit of an unforgivable kind of thing of like a really obvious question. The one thing I think most people probably come into the annotations maybe expecting an answer to there, and it's completely, you know, thrown back of like, no, what do you believe? And that's not good. So I've obviously, I don't particularly think the annotations are fantastic. I think they would be much better off changing them quite heavily in that, like, I think a lot of the annotations would best be summed up as almost like Q&A things that they do at the back of these comics, rather than every page in the comic has to have these giant borders when we're not even going to use half of them. That's just never worked for me overall. So yeah, I think going forward, I think they either need to directly probably answer some fan questions to direct what people want from these annotations, because it just feels like most of them are just like, yeah, here's random commentary that doesn't mean anything coming out of it. So frustrating, but again, the point that I want to make about these hardcovers is you should not be buying this book solely for the annotations and the art extras at the back. You should be buying this book because you want a hardcover collected edition of these 3 comics to have in your collection to go along with your other big hardcover books as part of your collection of Avatar comics. And that's the point. It's for kind of consistency across your collection kind of point of view, because the quality of this book as a hardcover is very nice. Paper quality is nice. The print quality is very nice. Dark Horse have always done good hardcovers. That's the kind of point here. I will also mention though that there has been a price increase. I guess we haven't maybe noticed this so much just because I think it's more down to sort of the economy and just inflation type stuff. But this retail price compared to the retail price on the Imbalance, so an equivalent book, library edition, that one was $39.99 US dollars. This is $49.99 US dollars. So there has been a bit of a price increase, and I guess that's makes sense for kind of what's happening, but it is also frustrating. The value proposition isn't as good anymore, and I do think that maybe they need to throw in a little bit extra to these to make them feel a little bit better. One thing for me, I feel, is just like, hey, you have this poster that you did as part of the box set. Why can't you just put the poster in this, like inside the front or back cover? Just throw this in, because these books come wrapped in plastic already, so they're sealed. So yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to worry about these being like stolen or anything like that, but just, you know, throw this in here, and that's a fun little addition here. Because I often feel like these are a little bit too plain. The same goes for the deluxe sets, for the like art books as well. Just the fact that they go for this really fancy, you know, folio kind of art print thing, when a lot of us would kind of like more of like, hey, throw in a pin, throw in some art cards, throw in a poster and stuff like that, just to make it a little bit more fun while also still having that deluxe kind of quality stuff overall. But yeah, I just feel this many years in, some of the aspects of the kind of these higher quality releases are just a little stale right now for Avatar, and they could do with them kind of freshening up. Obviously, you need to keep design elements like the spines the same for collection purposes, but other bits like could be done, I think, to improve things in terms of how they do extras and so on. But there are my thoughts there. I'll just very quickly give a slight review on the individual books themselves. So Katara and the Pirate Silver, Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy, and Suki Alone. I've of course done individual reviews about all of them, but just for a little bit of context here. My thoughts basically is that these three comics, as they released, improved as they went on. I think we started off one-shot comics, not great. Katara and the Pirate Silver is a fine book, but fine was not what we needed at the time. They needed to start the one-shot comics with something more substantial than what Katara and the Pirate Silver was, and so they kind of missed the mark a little bit, even though there is some decent stuff in that book. I think it was a little bit of a mistake to have it to start off with a book just set in the middle of like some episodes and it be a little bit random, and Katara doesn't have a character arc necessarily as part of it. Improvement definitely going into Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy, because it's set in the comic timeline, so it allows you to address Toph a little bit further into the future and relate to comic plot points that have come up when it comes to like her being a teacher, her metalbending students, and where she's at with the academy going forward, as well as, you know, reintroducing a character like Chong and playing that kind of dual dynamic of like they're both experiencing the same kind of issues related to, you know, what they love becoming their job now. That was kind of nicely done, but there was the frustrating aspect of the book ended right as it got to probably the most interesting point of Toph's about to train a lava bender. Who knows when we'll ever see Sun again? That's frustrating. Suki Alone, definitely, I think of the first three, is the best for me because it feels like it's the most important comic. If you're a fan of Suki, this is a comic you kind of have to read because it has some key Suki backstory. It fills in gaps about what was she doing like in between her these two appearances from her in the show, introducing, you know, characters from her past, but also having a present day plot for her in the Boiling Rock prior to that episode actually taking place with the arrival of Sokka and Zuko. I just think they got a lot of it right, and minus some question points about, say, like the whole Kyoshi detail and stuff like that. Some of that very kind of in-depth detail stuff. I think they got it right from a character point of view in terms of like what a one-shot is meant to be. This gave us substantial information and depth to Suki as a character. And I think they've mostly continued that on with Azula in the Spirit Temple being a nice in-depth character exploration for Azula. The Toph and Iroh comic, at the same time doing development with a more minor character, but also giving us enough with Iroh to keep it interesting. And by the looks of things, they're going to deliver probably the most in-demand book they've probably ever had with Ashes of the Academy, with it being kind of Zuko, Mei, and Ki focused. So they seem to be on the right track, but I still feel they probably should get back to trilogies at some point sooner rather than later, because I'm not sure, no matter what they do for like the Avatar Studios content, I'm not sure it's ever going to entirely justify stopping the trilogies that early. That many years before we're ever going to see an animated thing. I'm not sure I'm going to buy that as being something that was required. But that's more of just some reflections on the overall trajectory of comics over the last couple of years, where we're only just now, after so many years, beginning to get back on track with multiple releases in a year and sort of thing. And that's probably part of the bigger problem with maybe some of these earlier one-shot comics, is that in a lot of cases, these were the only, individually, they were the only comic that came out this year. Like Katara and the Pirate Silver, that was the only release that year, and that was a bit frustrating. Or it was that and a small free comic book day book, and that's it. That wasn't great. So yeah, library edition release for Team Avatar Treasury. Nice, but again, mostly a kind of collector's purchase type thing, if that's what you're going for. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.